would like to kindly ask that 2 representatives from each country please be seated at their table, and for whoever else is here, please be seated behind them or on the bleachers. Thank you.
highest proportion of country-endemic vascular plant species at 25% as compared to other tropical regions of the world. Its high species diversity and endemicity makes ASEAN one of the world's critical habitats. Many communities in this region are interdependent with the native flora and fauna for their survival and livelihood, such as for primary food and water source, shelter, tourism, traditional medicine, traditional crops, sacred lands, cultural beliefs and practices, and other non-tangible values. The loss of species affects these communities and affects us all, directly and indirectly. Illegal wildlife trafficking is currently the fourth most lucrative transnational crime, falling behind drugs, humans, and arms trafficking. The illegal wildlife trafficking industry is valued at up to $23 billion a year. The amount is equivalent to about 1/4 of the total value of transnational organized crime in the region. The species loss due to poaching and wildlife trafficking is one of the main pressures facing the region's biodiversity, given that the Southeast Asian region is one of the world's wildlife trade hotspots. The region is a key supplier of the international market in wildlife, legal and illegal. The value of the illegal wildlife trade in East Asia and the Pacific is estimated at about $2.5 billion annually. This includes trading of live animals as pets, animal parts as ornaments, luxury items, bushmeat, and traditional medicines. Because of the species richness of the region and the issue of wildlife trade, species conservation and wildlife law enforcement is one of the priority thematic concerns of the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity. The issue of wildlife trafficking cannot be addressed by one or two countries in the region. Our interconnectedness through the species that we share, or species that migrate across our borders, and the transboundary nature of wildlife crimes make it imperative for the ASEAN member states and our neighbors to closely work together to address the issue related to illegal wildlife trade. These days, criminals are getting better equipped to carry out environmental crimes. With the use of social media and the internet in these illegal activities, conventional ways of capturing wildlife criminals or addressing illegal wildlife trade have been rendered ineffective. Wildlife cybercrime is one of the latest challenges that has escalated the illegal trade. With the cyberspace as the marketplace being used by millions of people having direct access to illegal suppliers with just a few clicks, making it more difficult for authorities to detect and to take effective actions. To combat crimes against wildlife and forests, we need to be more innovative and be more creative than the criminals. We need to take a big leap ahead from these offenders in our efforts to address forest and wildlife crimes. We need to look at current technologies and the latest scientific methods to track poached wildlife and illegal traders, to nab the kingpins and cripple the networks. We need more systematic intelligence gathering and sharing across the region and the rest of the world to protect our precious wildlife resources from being depleted because of illegal collection and trade. We need to further explore the use of tools and techniques such as forensic genetics, drones, real-time technologies, geospatial technologies, and analytics software for combating wildlife and forest crimes. We also need to better leverage on the existing communications platforms and utilize them to our benefit for effective intelligence sharing. Establishing better mechanisms for collaboration between law enforcement agencies and other supporting organizations working together will also be a key to successful operations to combat wildlife trafficking. We also need to strengthen environmental law enforcement and increase fines and penalties among environmental offenders. Overexploitation and the use of illegal and destructive harvesting practices and poaching and trafficking of wild plants and animals have to be curtailed. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased that this conference themes address the issues relating to reducing illegal activities concerning wildlife and forests. And we are certain that with your participation, our brothers and sisters from Asia and Africa, particularly those who are involved in wildlife and forest law enforcement and protected area management, will be highly beneficial as a way forward for addressing these critical issues in the region. And I would like to extend my deepest appreciation once again to our host, the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation of Thailand, and the Asian Institute of Technology, and partners, UNDP, Lusaka Agreement Task Force, SAWEN, UNOSA, who have given ACB the opportunity to collaborate and be part of this conference. This collaboration has been made possible through the European Union-funded project with our center, the Biodiversity Conservation and Management of Protected Areas in ASEAN. Our center is committed to continue supporting the process to keep wildlife in the ASEAN within ASEAN, to better serve the region and the One ASEAN community, to contribute to livelihoods, maintain ecological and human health, and maximize their use for the benefit of the people of ASEAN. We have great challenges in the work we do, and we also have great and exciting opportunities to build up using science, technology, and innovative approaches, which is what we are here for in the next 2 days. I wish all of us a fruitful and meaningful conference ahead. Thank you very much, and good morning.
Thank you. We definitely agree with the statements on current technology and the furtherment of technology in these efforts. Next, we would like to invite Mr. Edward Fierce, Director of Lusaka Agreement Task Force, to give his speech. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Edward Piri. I'm Director of Lusaka Agreement Task Force. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I salute you all for finding time from your busy schedules to grace this important conference, which is aimed at enhancing international cooperation in science, technology, and innovation towards addressing wildlife and forest crime and attaining sustainable development goals. Your presence attests to your firm commitment towards environmental conservation. I wish to recognize the integral role of science and technology in addressing wildlife and forest crime. Hence, this conference could not have come at a better time. I wish to state that Lusaka Agreement Task Force appreciates her robust partnership arrangement with Asia Institute of Technology and other partners, as well as experts such as Dr. Remy Chandran, Mr. Koi, all working together to develop useful technologies aimed at addressing wildlife and forest crimes. I therefore wish to commend the great work put in place by AIT and all partners involved to ensure that this timely conference is a success. Let me also, on behalf of Lusaka Agreement member states, thank AIT for the unwavering support accorded to us and other distinguished delegates received since we arrived in this beautiful city of Bangkok. Our appreciation will not be complete without thanking Restec Japan for facilitating participation of LATIF and other organizations to this conference and for support it continues to lend to Lusaka Agreement, fraternity and beyond. We are indeed grateful. I wish to reiterate that Lusaka Agreement Task Force, which is at the fore in the fight against transnational wildlife crime in Africa, is proud to be associated with this conference. In recognition of this fact, Lusaka Agreement Task Force partnered with the United Nations University, Japan, and University of Twente in 2011 to implement the Wildlife Enforcement Management System in 4 Lusaka Agreement member states, namely Congo-Brazzaville, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. We hope to extend this in other African countries. Most recently, in November 2016, Lusaka Agreement Task Force signed a memorandum of understanding with the Asia Institute of Technology to bolster cooperation in the implementation of the Wildlife Enforcement Monitoring System, as well as enhance establishment of transcontinental collaboration between Africa and Asia. The Wildlife Enforcement Monitoring System is therefore being implemented under a partnership arrangement. Through the Wildlife Enforcement Monitoring System initiative, Lusaka Agreement member states have successfully shared seizure and other crucial data from which the Lusaka Agreement Task Force has derived vital lessons and experiences on transboundary wildlife and forest crime information sharing for informed policy and decision making. In addition, Lusaka Agreement Task Force, with its partners, is exploring further on how to develop the Wildlife Enforcement Monitoring System further to embrace additional technological solutions in monitoring and supporting wildlife, as well as forest conservation. We envisage that this project will ultimately result in the establishment of an information center that will pull data information from diverse sources for purposes of making informed decisions on conservation in Africa and Asia. The main objective of this initiative is to buttress the efforts that countries are making in combating illegal wildlife trade, a vice that continues to decimate our much treasured environmental resources. As I conclude, let me once more take this opportunity to thank the Asia Institute of Technology for all the support you have provided to make this conference a reality. Lusaka Agreement Task Force will all ask. I wish you all fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edward. We indeed hope that the collaboration between the Lusaka Agreement Task Force and the Asian Institute of Technology will share similar success stories across Asia and Africa.
Next, we would like to invite Mr. Kaname Ikeda, President of Remote Sensing Technology Center of Japan, on stage, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kaname Ikeda. I'm President of Remote Sensing Technology Center of Japan, which has been specializing for many years the use of space technology for Earth observation. I'm delighted to be able to join here this conference together with African friends. It goes back almost 4 years that I was personally exposed to this issue of protecting wildlife against illegal hunting or trafficking for the first time. It was on the occasion of the International Symposium at Tokyo, organized by United Nations University on UN Wildlife Day. Since then, we have been following this issue through various events like international symposium or our direct communications with people at the front, like Lusaka Agreement Task Force in Africa. Our motivation is to help improve this international operation by means of using space technology, like monitoring environment or move of animals by satellites or drones. Recently, we came to learn AIT has been deeply involved in this international operation. And for now, we are quite appreciative of their effort to have organized this international conference at this time on this subject. It is our sincere wish that this AIT conference could effectively highlight current situation of this issue and draw the picture for future development with participation of relevant stakeholders. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ikeda. I would now like to inform that there is a press conference going to be held in the press room B144B. I would like to invite the following delegates towards the press room. Mr. Man Bahadur Khadka, the Director General of the Department of National Parks and Wildlife Conservation, Nepal. Dr. Pinsak Suaswadi, the Deputy Director General, Department of National Park, Wildlife and Plant Conservation of Thailand. Mr. Edward Phiri, the Director of Lusaka Agreement Task Force, and Mr. Somkiat Sunton Pitakol, the Director of the Division of Wild Fauna and Flora Protection of Thailand.
If there is anyone else who would like to join, please follow our ushers who should be at the door to lead you to room B144B to the press room. Thank you. We would like to next invite Mr. Jeffrey McNeely, Advisor to the Department of National Parks, Wildlife and Plant Conservation Thailand, to address the congregation about addressing wildlife and forest crimes to attain the SDGs, the role of science and technology and innovation.
Okay, you all know why you're here. And actually, I'm going to talk about something that the four people who just stepped out to go to the press conference really need to hear. And that is why what we're talking about today, oops, let's put it up here, please. Technology sometimes works great. Yeah, could you go ahead and load it? Thank you. Almost. Okay, so that's why we're here. You all know this very well. I don't need to remind you. But wildlife and forest crime and the SDGs, how do those fit together? Well, let's start by looking at change. And we all know that there are a lot of different kinds of change. We biologists in here, we know about evolution. That's the way that species from one creates many. There are flips when something amazing happens, like a real good leader gets elected in a country. Things change. There's accelerating changes like population growth and so forth, where things get quicker and quicker. The cyclical changes like the seasons. Revolutionary changes where things go along and something big happens and things goes back and then it goes around and around. Then there are retrogressive changes. When something horrible happens, we have to go back. And then there are catastrophic changes, maybe like climate or a huge forest fire, those kinds of things. So those are the kinds of changes that we see, and one of them that we're going to be looking at a lot today is technology. So technological change is one of those accelerating changes. They're moving more quickly now at a geometric rate. I saw a paper a couple weeks ago that suggested that so far in this century, there's been more technological progress than all of the previous century. And all of you in this room have your cell phones, so you can do your emails while I speak. Amazing. You couldn't have done that last century. Cell phone, the iPhone, that was maybe 10 years ago, where we actually had a computer that we could hold in our hands. I remember when I was a university student at the University of California in Los Angeles, our computer room was the size of this auditorium. Now, every student has the same thing in his or her hand. Amazing, the technological change. So this gives us amazing power to access information and to use it in creative ways. Unfortunately, it also has some downsides. As we heard from one of the previous speakers, the internet is also being used to promote wildlife crime. So a lot of trading is happening through the internet of illegal species throughout the world. So we have to be aware that when we're talking about wildlife crime, we're also talking about technology and how it's being used. So these are the SDGs, all of them, and this is an important toolbox for adapting to change. These changes are the kinds of changes that I put up there are what governments need to deal with, and that we all need to deal with as everyday people and in our jobs. The SDGs give us a framework for doing that. And what I'm going to suggest is that all of these have a link to biodiversity, the variability in genes, species, and ecosystems. And I'm going to try to convince you of that. So here's the focus of this meeting. And I'm not going to read it because you all know it perfectly well. This is the one that focuses on biodiversity. This is the one that many of us care about the most. I care about the most. But I'm going to suggest that we need to look at this a little more closely. So we have already a tremendous framework of legal instruments, international conventions that are well funded, that have good advice for how we can manage our biodiversity, our living natural resources more effectively. The Climate Change Convention, the Convention on Biodiversity, the Convention on the Law of the Sea, the Desertification Convention, CITES, of course, World Heritage, Ramsar, wetlands. Then there's FAO that has World Forestry Congresses, but no convention. Governments haven't been able to agree on a convention on forests, which is something we should perhaps think about. But the point is, here we have a tremendous, powerful set of laws where all of our countries get together, everybody has an equal voice at these, and we discuss how we can come up with measures to help us to address the issues that these are addressing, including ours, wildlife crime and forest crime. But we can see from, you all know this very well, I'm afraid it's a little bit faded down there so you don't see the threatened corals, but we all know that threatened mammals, threatened birds, threatened corals, threatened amphibians, we still have a big problem. So with all of those laws, we haven't been able to actually solve our problems of species conservation, of wildlife. And then with forests, the deforestation continues, as you could see from this map. And this picture over here on the left is one tree from a national park here in Thailand. It's a rosewood tree, said to be the biggest left in Thailand. And you can see there's a guard posted there and a big fence all the way around it, trying to protect this last rosewood tree in Thailand from being cut down, even within a national park. So we're not really in charge as nearly as effectively as we need to be. But concern about species can work. So let's look at tigers for just a minute. International cooperation on tiger conservation has been stimulated by bringing the heads of state. Vladimir Putin from Russia brought them together from the tiger-range countries to sit down and talk about how we're going to conserve tigers. And as a result, things have happened. Innovative science and technology have been used. So up on the upper left is what happens to tigers. They get slaughtered. But when research is done on tigers, radio tracking, satellite tracking, all of these have been used to address the issue of tiger poaching. And the result is that tigers have come back. But I'm going to suggest that there's another kind of technology, not just the satellites and the other kinds of things we're talking about, but what we might call soft technology. And I would suggest that this is just as innovative. This is just as much application of technology. This is as much using science for Nepal. And we heard from the president of Nepal, and I thought she was very eloquent about what is happening in that country. These images are ones that I took in Chitwan National Park in March. I first went to Chitwan when I was working in Nepal from 1972 to 1974. And in Chitwan, there was a big problem with poaching, a big problem with the villagers who lived within the boundaries of the park, and conflicts, and the elephants were raiding and the tigers were causing problems. A lot of poaching, a lot of big problems. They had to bring in the military, as the president indicated. Now, I go back to Chitwan, and if you look on the lower right, the rhinos are so common that they come down the street. You look on the upper left, walking down the street are elephants that are taking people into the national park. And if you look on the upper right, you can see one of the local people who is now earning a very good living from running tourism operations within the national park. And on the left, all the signs of operations within Chitwan, right on the boundary of Chitwan National Park, where the local people have really taken ownership of conservation of Chitwan National Park. And as a result, the poaching of tigers and the poaching of rhinos has greatly reduced, and the village is prospering. People are happy. That's because they're behind it. And so here's one result, is that the tiger population between 2010 and 2016 increased from 3,200 to almost 3,900. So it works. If we can apply that kind of technology, we can be successful. But what about the other 16 SDGs? There's 16 other ones besides 15 that I think we need to pay attention to. They have something to contribute to us. They have something that they can teach us, and maybe we have some things that we can teach them. We need to be talking to the other SDGs, the people who are pushing the other SDGs, to be considering our issues as well. So the first one, quite rightly, is addressing poverty. And this gives you a real good indication of how complicated it is. It's not easy to address poverty. It's a lot of things that go into it. And one of them is this target 115, about 1.5, about building resilience of the poor. The resilience for the poor really depends on the environment within which they live, the living natural resources upon which their welfare depends. And these are just some examples from around the world. So, do the rural poor want this, or do they want this? So effective management is going to give them a more productive ecosystem within which they have a much better opportunity to prosper than if they overexploit the resources and if external forces come in and force them into unsustainable behavior. So we've got something to contribute to poverty. Then the second one is about food security. A lot of the people living in rural areas are considered to be poor, but their welfare depends very much on ecosystems where they live and the ecosystems surrounding them. Here's a picture from China indicating that the surrounding mountains that are covered with forest are providing water to provide irrigation to the farms, just as one example. But if we look at the whole series of ecological interactions, the ways that biodiversity contributes to human welfare in agricultural landscapes. So I could go into this in great detail, but the point really is that biodiversity contributes to productive agriculture. Maintaining the diversity of wild species and domestic species is part of productive agriculture. And if we look at the wild relatives of domestic animals, almost all of these are subject to wildlife crime. All of the species that you see up here, couldn't show all of the sheep and wild goats or all the species of wild pigs, almost all of these are protected species. They have genetic diversity that's going to be required to help us adapt to changing conditions in the future. So here's another way that the work that we're doing contributes to productive agriculture, and that they ought to be listening to us. SDG 3 deals with health. And I looked carefully through SDG 3. There was no mention of the harvest of wildlife and wild relatives of wild medicinal plants. And we know very well that the biggest threat to rhinos is poaching, because there are people who believe that rhino horn has medicinal values. The same with tigers up in the upper right. Pangolin scales, I think we'll hear later from one of the speakers more details about this. So the point is that the people who are responsible for SDG 3 need to listen to us. We need to communicate more effectively with them to let them know that what they're dealing with also has some relevance to our issues. So let's find ways to work with the medicinal people to help them to address this aspect of wildlife crime. Then we have SDG 4, which is all about, as I said, 4.7, which is acquired knowledge and skills. We all know, I think in all of our countries, we have wildlife education. So this is really an important part, maybe mainstream. SDG 5 on gender equality, women participation and leadership. I show up there in the upper left a lot of examples from various parts of the world where indeed this is happening. Women control over natural resources, also part of SDG 5. So the point here is that these kinds of issues also are ones where we can contribute and where they can contribute to what we're trying to accomplish. SDG 6 is all about water. Well, we all need water. Everybody needs water. We need safe drinking water. Water use efficiency is SDG 6.4. The water-related ecosystems, I put 6.6 up there somewhere, which is basically the Ramsar Convention. And the Ramsar Convention is wetlands of international importance that is very much addressing our kinds of issues. And then 6A, somewhere down on the lower left, is about international cooperation in managing water. So this is actually the Mekong River, but there are many of the major rivers of Asia, and certainly Africa, the Nile, have many countries involved. So this is the rivers offers a basis for international cooperation. That's what we also need for addressing wildlife and forest crime. So the framework for cooperation that water provides is also a mechanism for us to cooperate with a different audience that is also a very influential one. Okay, then we have energy. Well, if you look on the lower right, energy demand is definitely going to continue to increase. There's no doubt about that. Where are we going to get the energy? So SDG 7 says renewable energy. So on the lower left, we've got biofuels and wind. On the upper right, there's solar panel. And then on the upper left is 7B, which is expanding infrastructure for sustainable energy. So we all know that in all of our countries, there are major investments being made in hydropower. All of those are flooding important habitats for the species that we would like to conserve. But at the same time, we have to figure out how can we make an appropriate arrangement? How can we do appropriate development of hydropower resources that are going to provide the energy, but also protect the watershed around them, for example? Ways of investing the funds for a big development project also into managing the ecosystem services that enable the large dams to be productive. So just, I'm not talking in great detail on here, but just putting the ideas on the table for us to consider. Then, here are a few just real quick ones. So SDG 8 is on sustainable growth, or economic growth. Well, okay, great. But is this going to also increase the impact on wildlife and forest crime? Well, it could. But if we're careful about it, we can work an arrangement so that the economic growth is reducing the kind of demands on threatened species of wildlife and forest. Resilient infrastructure is SDG 9. This is a picture I took in Laos in the upper right, and this is part of the Belt and Road Initiative, well known to many of you, strongly supported by the government of China throughout the world now. Great, building the infrastructure. They need it in Laos. But what about adding an environmental component to every one of these new road elements into a place like the forests of Laos? These are things that we need to ensure are included within something like SDG 9. So sustainable infrastructure also needs to take into consideration the conservation of biodiversity, management of the ecosystems that are going to continue to make the infrastructure sustainable. Then reducing equality within and among nations. Over here in 10, these are really about financial flows. And I think that the conventions that I mentioned earlier provide a basis for that. Meetings like this also help to discuss these kinds of issues. These are going to be very much on the plate. Then sustainable cities. Well, we all know in all of our countries that more and more people are moving to cities. They like to live in the cities. There are a lot of advantages. But cities that are sustainable are ones that conserve cultural heritage and also the natural heritage within which they live. So green cities are very much a part of SDG 11. Reducing the per capita impact, increasing green public spaces. We see here in Bangkok many of those. And environmental links between, I had 11A in there, between the cities and the surrounding green lands. Bangkok maybe not so much, but look at Chiang Mai, and many of the cities in all of our countries are surrounded by greenlands as well. So protected areas in the upper watersheds feeding into cities, tourism from the cities into the rural areas are all ways that cities are also related to us. And it may be that much of the wildlife crime and forest crime goes to nurture what people in the cities like to consume. So we need to look at both the supply of these illegally harvested resources and the demand. And maybe within cities we can start to address the demand on species that we care about conserving, try to reduce that demand and replace it with something else. Then here's a really important one, sustainable consumption and production patterns. So how are we going to sustainably use these? We have pollution is a big issue here. So waste management and chemical pollutants in the upper right, these are affecting all habitats. So the people who are addressing pollution are also having an impact on the species that we're trying to conserve through our focus on wildlife and forest crime. I put 12.6 down here, the Forest Stewardship Council. These are the private sector putting more attention into sustainable practices. This is very strongly pushed in SDG 12. Then 12.8, which is over there on the right, is people have relevant information and awareness about the importance of sustainable use. So she's a tree hugger. She understands how important that tree is. We have to get more people to understand the importance of sustainable use of natural resources. So we all know what the challenge is. Here's a nice satellite image showing Khao National Park in the left and some of the other areas, and how land use is really complicated. It's not easy to actually implement sustainable development. It's going to take a lot of effort. 40% of the world's trade is biological processes and products. 40%. So too much of this, it's illegal. These are the things that we're going to be addressing here, but it's very much part of this SDG. Oops. But also within that is 12B, which calls for sustainable tourism. So if we look at the protected area targets under the Convention on Biodiversity, saying that 17% of the land needs to be in protected areas. Well, good. That's a positive contribution to sustainability. The less positive is when we have powerful people who are out there hunting the species that we're trying to conserve. This son of a world leader has just cut the tail off an elephant he shot. But we don't need that. We need leadership from the top, like from the president of Nepal. What about climate change? Well, we all know about climate change. The people who are working on climate change are working too much on, this is where all the money is going, into trying to reduce the emissions from coal-fired power plants. So that's a big problem. But if you look at, go into the SDG and look at some of the other things that it is addressing. So I just mentioned some of them, putting them into mitigation, adaptation, a green climate fund, building capacity in marine and coastal ecosystems. Those are all part of SDG 13. Especially important is the forests. So here are the lungs of the earth. We all care about forests, and we should care about them also because they help us to adapt to climate change and to mitigate the damage from climate change. So the criminals who are illegally clearing our forests are actually contributing to or undermining our approaches to addressing the problems of climate change. Climate change is getting a lot of attention. We need to also stress that the forests need to receive more of the attention, more of the effort to address climate change, and that, of course, will help us to fight illegal forest crime. Then SDG 14, we're not talking here very much about the marine habitats, but if you look, illegal fishing costs $36 billion a year. And it's more than just a crime against fish, it's a crime against the people who depend on sustainable fisheries. So the protected areas, the 10% that is the target in the marine habitat, are places where fish can reproduce and be more productive and can contribute to a sustainable fishery. We're nowhere close to sustainable fishing now, but we need to be if we're going to address wildlife crime, because a lot of the illegal fishing also goes up in the upper left is a dolphin who's caught in a net, and that happens way too much. So what do we have? One technological solution is the satellite tracking project called Eyes of the Seas to track illegal fishing. And they can also be used for research. In the lower right is one of the sea turtles, all of which are threatened, that is has a radio tracking on his back, so he can be followed wherever he goes. So technology is also contributing to conservation. So I suggest that we need to look more at the marine habitats, or at least include the marine habitats in our discussions. So getting closer to the end here, 16, we all know about peaceful, inclusive society, sustainable development, justice, all of that stuff. We all agree that's really important. But what's happening? Organized crime. And so a lot of this SDG really looks at organized crime. And a lot of these crime networks that we're going to hear about from other speakers that are used for human trafficking and arms trafficking are the very ones that are also the kingpins of the wildlife trade and the timber trade. So the same kinds of approaches that are being used for these kinds of criminal activity is also being used for the issues that we're addressing. And it's not peaceful. Look at what's happening. 200 environmental activists were killed in 2016. So the people who are campaigning to support our issues are being shot or being killed in other ways. The people that are out there on the ground in our protected areas trying to fight the poachers, we lose about 100 of those every year. So this is not an easy thing to do. It takes courage and takes a serious effort. And thank goodness we have people who can do it. And these kind of criminal gangs are also threats to national security. So if we start talking more about things like national security, perhaps we can get stronger support for the kinds of efforts that we're trying to push. So here are the positive things that are being suggested by SDG 16. So I don't need to read all of those, you can read them for yourself, but these are basically the fundamental 5 things that we need to have. And all of these are being addressed by exactly these. So those 5 things, those 5 elements of SDG 16 are a part of this legal structure. And I put FAO over there. We need a forest convention. So if we're going to talk about forest crime, it's got to be part of an international convention. So maybe we can push that. So now we come to 17. Now this is the last one. We need to strengthen the means of implementation. How are we going to re-energize? You know, if we've lost the energy, how do we get it back? Well, I go back to where we started. You know, look at all these organizations that are working on these very issues. And we've got the development banks, we've got government, of course, we've got FAO, we've got the International Criminal Court, we've got WTO, the International Chamber of Commerce, the private sector, UNEP, IMO, Google. You know, so there are a lot of people out there working on this. They're working on various aspects of the SDGs. And if we can approach them in an appropriate way, we can get them also to contribute to our effort, and we can contribute to theirs. I also mentioned Google. So here are the 3 that I'm just going to I picked 3 that I'd like to particularly emphasize. This one is a global technology facilitation mechanism. So I think the soft technology that I mentioned is being used in Chitwan and Nepal is wonderful. But I also think it's incredible that a butterfly can have a radio transmitter put on it and it can still fly. I just find that astonishing, you know, that they can do that. I didn't get a cell phone until a long time ago. And then there's all kinds of remote sensing. We've got drones that we'll hear more about. The Tiger is kind of playing with a camera that's robot driven. There are a lot of things out there, a lot of technology that can be applied. So I think this is a really promising part of SDG 17. Then the next one is environmentally sound technologies to developing countries. This is a project here in Thailand, but smart patrolling using GPS and better information management is actually being applied in many parts of the world. And I think this is the kind of example that we should be trying to further promote. And then finally, to promote and encourage the public-private and civil society partnerships. You remember I put Google up there with all these big organizations. That's because Google, eBay, Facebook, and some others have joined something called the Global Coalition to End Wildlife Trafficking Online. Great. That's good. That needs to be an important part of what we're talking about at this meeting and in other fora when we get a chance. So here we are, where we started. Here are the SDGs. They provide a toolbox for addressing wildlife and forest crimes. I've suggested that all of these SDGs have relevance to what we're talking about here. And if we find ways to be thinking more broadly about our issues, how they fit with other issues that are being addressed, we're more likely to have the kind of impact that we would like to have. So use them all. Use all of these SDGs. Be thinking about them when we're trying to implement our various efforts against wildlife and forest crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffrey McNeely, for your informative talk on our current technologies, and I can definitely agree that we'd be in the Stone Age without our current technology and our smartphones. Coming up next.
I would now like to invite on stage Dr. Rani Chandran, Research Associate, National Institute for Environmental Studies, Japan, to present his report on the assessment of wildlife crime information management.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Remy Chandran. I work with the National Institute for Environmental Studies. Why I'm here is because I have a long-term experience working on wildlife information sharing for almost 15 years. And we tried to develop a transboundary information system on wildlife crime way back in 2003. And I think the process is still on. So you can imagine how difficult and how challenging the process of information exchange or information systems talking with each other between when it's placed into different countries. Now, based on that, last year when Manish actually contacted me about having an assessment of the different databases, whether we wanted to know if especially countries in the south, the developing countries, whether they have a database on wildlife crime. So I happily agreed to the survey, and it was a very interesting finding. So we used a different methodology, which I actually adopted in my PhD thesis, for looking at the different challenges in information system development to information sharing. And so we used a framework which I developed way back in 2014, and it's now in my PhD thesis. So if you look at the information sharing pattern, there are two issues. One is a technical issue, and the second one is the political and policy related challenges. So in context, when we try to say that we want to develop an information system, we hardly look into these two aspects in a broader fashion. And this is where the challenge is. If we had looked into these issues more broadly, probably we would have got a database way back, the moment when CITES Convention was formed. So I think the bigger picture lies in the challenges related to both the technological, political, and policy-related challenges. So on the information side, we have, of course, the technological and resource-related challenges. We have another big issue which hardly people look into is disciplinary boundaries. You know, if people who use information probably are not technocrats, so they don't understand. There is a difference in understanding in the technocratic issues and the policy-related issues. And then there are contextual boundaries as well. Again, information science is about, for example, when I was in UNU, my boss used to say, why can't we just implement a system, we can develop a system, implement it in a country, and let countries share information. We can have a system where we can have all the wildlife crime information in one single cloud infrastructure. But it will never happen because every country has its own information sharing protocols and policies. And on the political aspect, which I think, especially in CITES Convention, it's very, very strong. And one is the cultural boundaries, you know, how people perceive information on different countries. And then second is the political boundaries. You know, information also means power, so that can be the political context also in it. And of course, the geographical boundaries, and those are sometimes the challenges related to where you are placed. So that could also, for example, nobody talks about a database in the Caribbean. We all have such, but it's all about Africa, Asia, or in Europe or North America. So these are some of the issues that we thought we have to look into, and we did a survey. It's quite a broader report, so I'm not bringing out the whole picture here, and I'm making it very brief, and just want to bring out some of the key issues. So we asked one question, which is, do you have a national wildlife crime database? A very simple question. And from that, we requested the CITES management authority actually, and from 150 countries, around 50 responded, and you can see these are the countries which has a national wildlife crime database. So in many cases, we think that many countries do not have a wildlife crime database, but the reality is many countries have a wildlife crime database. It is in the different formats and different structures we have. And you can see, for example, South Africa. In most of these, but the difference is some of the databases are developed by national approaches, national interest. There's a governmental interest in it. In some of the national databases are developed based on a project interest. A project is there, there's a funding for this project, and because the funding is there, we can create a database. So those databases which are formed to national interest are sustainable. They live for a longer time. And the ones that are not formed to national interest are usually a project based, with the project ending, with the financial cases ending, it ends up. So a very good one is about India. India is, it was slow to adopt one, but it has got a very good national wildlife crime database as well. South Africa is one country which is one of the best in information management. And Botswana also. So you can see the southern African countries also. Nigeria has, though Nigeria, Nigeria has an information management problem. They have a very good database on for wildlife crime, but there is an information management problem between the wildlife powers and the customs agencies. And many other countries do not have, and also I think Japan has a national wildlife crime database which is managed by the National Police Agency, but they would not participate in a survey, or they would not want to, completely come out in public as well. So these are a global picture, a very, very small thing. Probably we need more research on this, but this is a first picture about what is happening on the information side. And then we asked about the sharing of information with the international agency. Compliance to CITES or any of those conventions, or even to, for Interpol, DC and other major international enforcement agencies as well, they need information sharing. And you can see, since we asked this question to CITES management authority, you can see most of them said yes to their sharing information to CITES. But I wonder whether CITES does manage a database or information system. Probably they do with the iQuick mechanism. And I think most of the information then goes to the CITES. And the second is Interpol. Now, here is a very interesting part of it. Why is it lesser? Why is information to Interpol is lesser than to CITES management authority? The reason is, in Interpol, they want nominal data. Interpol is interested in people, interested in capturing the criminals. But there are two reasons. One, countries don't give it. The two reasons for that is, you cannot call, you cannot arrest a person and call him a criminal until the court proves it. So until the court proves it, he still cannot be judged as a criminal, whose information can be given to Interpol. So for that reason, many countries do not share that data to Interpol. So that is a very key point. And the second thing is, in the case of other countries, they are still not sure how this information what is the effect of that information on the person himself. So on the human aspect, so much of that information did not go into Interpol. But non-nominal, so nominal data is very difficult to move transponderly, whereas non-nominal data, as you see in the case of scientists, do not need names of individuals or people, so that data actually can flow. So we need to, for information design, information management designers should make sure that they create databases in two systems. One is for nominal and the second for non-nominal data. And there are two different agencies which operate the system. The nominal data is by police, and the non-nominal data is by the wildlife agencies. But the nominal data, names of the persons, will be delayed. Obviously, that delayed because people won't share that information. So I think on the enforcement side, you should not wait for the nominal data to come. You should wait for the non-nominal data and try to get a picture about the wildlife crime itself. And the third one is WCO. I don't know why there's very less. Probably they just look at the boundaries at WCO. I think WCO has got a very good database also. Probably the WCO delegate can actually explain about that. And also there's a lot of NGOs involved, especially in developing countries. And I think traffic is one, and they also help and support information. So a lot of information is shared with NGOs also in certain parts of the world, but not all. So we then asked about the challenges. So now you have the information, so you have one. What are the challenges that you face? So one of the biggest challenge is, of course, system management. And this is what I talked about earlier, that there is disciplinary boundaries between people. People who are working on wildlife issues are not actually information system managers. They have an information system officer, but they are not the kind of IT kind of person. So in most cases, they find system management a big problem, because to manage especially geoinformation systems and information which has got security and all those things, they find it very difficult to manage. And the second issue is information not coming in time. This is a bigger issue at the national level among the national agencies. The information we are talking about is from the provinces and the districts on wildlife crime, and they are not coming into the main national wildlife crime database. And the reason is there is no structure in place. In many countries, there is no structure in place for information flow from the national, local enforcement agencies into the national wildlife crime databases. So when we talk about information sharing from national to regional to global, we should first understand that there is a basic challenge of information flow from the local wildlife divisions into the national wildlife crime division. And this, for immediate action, we need timely information, and that is not taking place. And I think I agree with the professor who from IIT. He said that information systems exist, but they are not none of them are real on a real-time basis. So in the case of addressing wildlife crime, you need to have at least very quick information. So that is not happening. So and the second part, all the provincial governments do not share information. So these are some of the basic challenges at the national level, which I think agencies like UNODC, Interpol, and other agencies should look into, and probably help in kind of establishing or facilitating the information flow from this local to the national level. So we then, among the technical skill, we wanted to know what are the specific technological skills, because I think the government of Japan is also interested in the technical aspect of information systems for wildlife crime. So we looked at, again, we see that there's a lack of skilled person on this issue. And of course, some of them talked about not having a good technology. Power failure is another major issue, especially in many of the developing countries. They don't, do information system to run, there's not even power failure. Internet connectivity is one for sharing information, and so on. So then we moved into the administrative challenges. Sorry, the red is not negative. So it's, for example, India doesn't, now you can see India doesn't face any administrative challenges. The reason behind it is because they have the Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, which has got a very strong network in all the provinces, all the states, and they have information flow taking place, so they do not face any kind of challenge, and they have a very structured process. They didn't have it for a very long time, but they just started it with the congratulations to Tilottama Verma. She's doing a wonderful job, and I think they have already established one. And some of those countries in the south, if you can see that South Africa, and though they have a good information system, they still have administrative related challenges. And these administrative related challenges are not related, could be political challenges also. They are not related to entirely information, people not having enough people there, but it could be related to some issues related to political challenges as well. So that we are not going into in detail in this one, but just a brief picture about what is happening here. Now we also asked about transnational information sharing, about countries sharing information between each other. And you can see that the orange ones are small ones, which on a case-to-case basis. And if you look at some countries, they don't even share information. Afghanistan or even Sudan, they don't share information with neighboring countries as well for some reason. Now again, we have to take this survey, it came from the CITES Management Authority. It is not from the National Police Agency. So there could be a difference in opinion among the different agencies who are also participating in the survey. But you can see that South Africa and India and other countries, including Pakistan, has got good information sharing processes. And this is about the global network on information sharing. Though we have different structures in place, there is, it is chaotic, as you see in the graph. It is very chaotic in the sense information is used on a case-to-case basis. We use it for certain things. You don't use it on there's no process. You use it for certain, because there is CITES COP coming. I need information. So, so that kind of approaches are made. So you can see there is information flow across the world, but it's not an organized, structured process. That's also that came out of the survey. So what we need to do in the whole process is that, of course, it's a long process. And I don't know whether CITES is the right forum to discuss about it, but I think there should be a process where people can think about a uniform, structured information sharing process, all from the bottom to top, and then from the national to the state and the regional bodies. So I will summarize my findings in a very, very short way, from the regional level, which will be interesting to the countries as well. So as I said before, South Africa, Botswana, and Mozambique have quite their own databases. Mozambique it is based on an internationally funded project. South Africa and Botswana have their own nationally structured databases. In West Asia, Jordan seems to be quite a useful partner. So you can see we can identify some champions on the ground who can actually facilitate in the information process, information collection and database management process. And in the West Asia region, Jordan would definitely be one country. In South Asia, India holds the most advanced information system, and then 7 countries probably could learn from the India experience on how to do that. In Southeast Asia, challenges are more with the interagency cooperation. I think, so that is basically what we found, that there are different agencies and they operate in a different way. And then Of course, there are institutional, financial, and technological challenges that remains a key. And one thing that probably we always talk about at enforcement meetings is that of strengthening regional enforcement networks. But we find that only the Lusaka agreement, or probably now SAVAN is trying to develop a framework, but many of the enforcement networks are failing. I think that is something that has to be examined, because they function when there is a funding, when they do not function when there is no funding. So it is very an agency which is functioning based on external, how much you can get funding from external agencies. So one thing that has to be accounted is for WENs to function is the sustainability. I mean, they should find their own ways of functioning, and that is very key. Thank you so much. If you have any questions.
Can I ask a question? Well, my name is Madhunilal. I'm from the Bangladesh Forest Department. I'm Division of Forest Division. Once in your slide, one of your slides, you mentioned that Bangladesh doesn't share information with other countries. But so far as I know that when I was working for the Wildlife Crime Control Unit in Bangladesh, I had shared many information with Interpol and some other countries like Singapore. We've also had a system of sharing through maybe not that systematic way, but through maybe say WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever. Yes, we had shared this one.
That's a very interesting point, because I'm talking about formal information sharing process, but there's this intelligence-related informal information sharing, which is very difficult for academicians to actually capture. So it's good that you pointed it out. I'm talking about non-nominal sharing of non-nominal data beyond the country. Living not inside the country. I'm talking about transboundary sharing of non-nominal data. I think as a process in many countries, the National Police Agency is an authoritative agency in sharing nominal data. I don't know. I've never seen a circumstance where wildlife agencies have ever or have the mandate to share nominal data. I don't know, you may have to confirm that. But from my understanding, it is the National Police Agency which has the mandate to share nominal data. Am I correct? Thanks. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chandran, for highlighting the need and importance of sharing information and managing it effectively and in a systematic manner across the South.
Next, we would like to begin our first session. the session 1A on science, technology, and innovation for addressing wildlife and forest crime. The chairperson for this session will be Dr. Manabu Onuma from the National Institute of Environmental Studies. The co-chair will be Mr. Faust Masalu from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Tourism, Tanzania. Dr. Onuma is a senior researcher at the Center of Environmental and Biology and Ecosystem Studies in the Department of Ecology, Risk Assessment and Control section. Thank you.
I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk. I need your permission to help. I can learn to understand you much better if I can get familiar with the way you talk. I need your permission to help.
From Japan. I'm really appreciate to be here, and many thanks to the organize this session. Many thanks to the all staff for the organizers. I'm chairperson on this session, Science, Technology, and Innovation for Addressing Wildlife and Forest Crime. In this session, we are mainly focusing on the wildlife forensic. The wildlife forensic is a new field, but this field plays This is a summary of this is an example of related biodiversity. By 2020, promote the implementation of sustainable management of all types of factors. And by 2020, protect and prevent the extinction of certain species. Take urgent action to end poaching and trafficking of protected species. Then last, global support for efforts to combat poaching and trafficking. To achieve these targets effectively under limited budget and human resources, we should prioritize areas based on some criteria. I think biodiversity support is one of the good options to prioritize. As we can see, 25 biodiversity hotspots out of 34 in Asia and Africa. And in addition, unfortunately, we could say that this region is illegal trading hotspot, including Japan. I show you some examples. They are confiscated penalty of Canada species. This is body part of tigers, and these confiscated kangaroo. I took this picture in South Asia country. And they are illegal trading cases in Japan. So I will move to the next presentation. I move to the next topic. I introduce you the presentation of wildlife in Japan. Especially the result of the molecular species identification on wildlife in Japan. At last, I introduce you the application of the result of molecular species identification. Actually, I introduce you myself, background. I'm in charge of genetic focus function of the endangered species in Japan. So genetic features evaluation, genetic biology evaluation is the most important work in my class. The National Health Agency knew my specialty, then asked me to do that work. So this is education. Actually, I'm very interested in the biology work because I worked in China and Malaysia for 6 years as a veterinary doctor. At the time, enforcing the work for illegal trading was very, very important work. So when the health agency,
recommendations among the law the fine for the periodic system is very, very high. Not more than 100 million. The success rate of natural species is 35.1%. Just one-third of items can be identified using molecular techniques. Species identification was success in name only. It is difficult to identify the species from far. I think it is because of the timing process. For you to make a farm, they have to do many processes to soften the species. That's why the DNA was engineered.
This is the breakdown of the species in male.
clouded leopard was the most common species, followed by leopard. In addition, tiger and Asian golden cats sequences were observed. However, the original location of the male were unknown. So actually the press agency asked me the original place of the male, but it is difficult for me to tell. So that's why international cooperation and data sharing is important to know the original place of the confiscated items. Success rate of the species identification of around 1/3. We just success 1/3 of the confiscated item. But I found interesting result. Just now I said I use the universal primer for the mammalian species. So sometimes, not many times, many times, I found the human sequence in 2017. I accept 22 items, confiscated items, and then I detected 20 human sequence in 22 items. First, when I found this result, I'm wondering this is my sequence or not. But fortunately, this is not my sequence. So this means this slide shows the global distribution of the mitochondrial DNA haplotype in humans. Of course, the sequence data obtained from the confiscated item may not be used as evidence in trial cases. But I think the data may be used as supportive data to investigate trading route. So actually the number of the prosecution is increasing yearly in Japan. This means the number of confiscated items are also increasing. As you saw, NIS helped an investigation, but very limited. The success rate of species identification around 30%. We should apply other approach to identify the species, such as morphologically and other digital analysis sections, digital analysis. But unfortunately, there is no morphology and digital analysis section neither in NIS nor other organization in Japan for the forensic work. So that's why the recommendation by international authorities will make Japanese government realize importance of wildlife forensic laboratories to establish the wildlife forensic laboratory in Japan. Actually, I want to establish wildlife forensic laboratory in Japan, and I need the support from all of you to convince the stakeholders in Japan. So that's all my presentation. Thank you for your attention. So this session have a very bit limited time, so I accept one question. Any questions on floor? Okay. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. So we move to the next presentation, tracing the illicit wildlife traffickers through the wildlife forensic lesson learned from the Thailand by Dr. Uttabon from Thailand. Canada. So, Dr. Canada, mic is yours. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Department of National Park, Wildlife and Plant Conservation, Thailand, it's my pleasure to be here as a part of the Bangkok Conference on Science, Technology, and Innovation for Advancing Wildlife and Forest Crime. I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you about my work experience in bioforensic laboratory, lesson learned from China. Here, we are in Bangkok, Thailand. I'd like to introduce you to my country a little bit. Thailand is in the mainland of Southeast Asia. It is a land of diversified traditional art and culture. Bangkok nowadays become a modern city with convenient and comfortable transportation. The growing of Bangkok is good, but unfortunately that is made Thailand as one of transit country for illegal wildlife trade too. The illegal wildlife trade is transported by land and or sea in different ways. Its routes are passed through Thailand to Laos, Vietnam, and to final destination in China. In the past until now, VNP have to accept the last amount of the dead confiscated wild animal in the country. Example, the big pile of ivory tusks, the bush moose, which can identify from outside characteristic, and the important species as tiger. These are our real case work. This example just some part of DNP work according to our mission. We have the law, Wild Animal Conservation and Protection Act, and also CITES Convention as our tools to protect our natural resources. As a tool for we start from zero. From the first year, we had only one PCR machine. To the second year, we had it more, and the PCR platform was set up. In the third year, we got the ABI genetic analysis machine using for the DNA sequencing work. This made our lab change into the closed system, which can do the forensic processes completely. The present we have got the new real-time PCR machine. So now our lab's capacity is developed by can run the both of SNP and fragment analysis. There are three aims of our labs. The first one is to investigate the confiscated wild animal. The second one is to establish the wild animal DNA database. And the third one is to develop the new technique for supporting wildlife forensic work. Our laboratory is a kind of service unit. The most of casework was sent by our DNP officer, and some casework was sent from the Customs Department, the Royal Thai Police, and the Marine Department respectively. Overall samples in average nearly 900 samples per year. So from past until now, we get more than 200 casework with more than 4,000 samples. Let me show you a little bit about the big project of overlap, which has just finished last year successfully. We have established the domestic elephant DNA database in whole country. This project was implemented according to our government's policy and instruction. Thailand is the one country of Asian elephant range state. We have around 4,000 individuals domestic elephants which have to be mated to adopt a DNA registration system. Normally, from the past until now, our captive elephant have to process the register ticket to show that it is legal. But in some cases, we found the wild animals were taken from the wild and were treated as the captive elephant. To prevent and solve this problem, the register will ensure that captive elephants can be easily distinguished from their wild counterpart. The DNA profiling was done into two methods. The first one is the 16-slip marker, and the second one is the 13 microsatellite marker. We hope that the complete DNA register for Thai captive elephant is the milestone used for both wild and captive elephant across Asia that may contribute to combat the illegal wildlife trade as well. Let me come back to our routine casework, wildlife DNA investigation. There are two kinds of investigation in our lab. The first one is species or subspecies identification by DNA sequencing method. And the second one is individual or parental identification by fragment analysis method. We apply the universal primer on the cytochrome B gene in mitochondrial DNA as the genetic marker for our animal investigation. This universal primer could classify and differentiate the mammal into the species level of our mammal family. The example of our important cases can be shown like this. Rhino game cases. This case in our lab were not much, but all cases were important. We have only 6 cases and 51 horn samples. This is one of our cases, which was seized from Suvarnabhumi Airport 5 years ago. We found 6 pieces of horn smuggled in the hippopotame in the luggage. In this luggage, we were surprised that we found some snack bag and a lot of garlic in the luggage. I think perhaps the garlic could be used for deodorizer to stop the strong smell purpose. The biggest case last year is the case of 21 rhino horns. The horns were found in luggage sent from Ethiopia to Thailand. All of these horns can be estimated value of $5 million US. And our lab results show that there were 2 black rhinos and and the rest were the white rhino. For the tiger cases, we have more than 30 cases of more than 450 samples. And our biggest case is the tiger temple case. This temple is famous. This temple is famous for tourists on the tame tiger can be fed and play with. But we found something wrong since the temple cannot show the document for legal tiger possession. So the adult 147 tigers were seized by the MP and were translocated to the breeding station. The 40 dead tiger cubs were found in the temple too. For the result, we found the most are Siberian tiger and the few are Malayan and Indo-Chinese. The parental testing were done among those populations with multi-microsatellite marker, and we found some tigers are not related with any parents among population. It means that maybe these offspring were taken from outside temple, or perhaps their parents were sold outside already. So we can say that there are illegal tigers in this case. The famous and the last tiger case in overlap is the Black Panther case. This case has resulted already, but hasn't been considered in the court yet. So I can show you just the main point of the case. There are so many kinds of physical evidence in this crime scene, such as the skin, the tissue, the bone, the entrails, the boiled tail in the soup, the blood on leaf, and the blood on the knife. So our question of the case could be what species and what sex of those evidence. And the very important question is, these animal parts are the same individual or not? This case haven't finished yet. Anyway, I believe that our result could be useful for certain evidence in court. Exactly. For elephant and owl cases, now we have about 100 cases with more than 1,750 samples. This kind is the most samples of overlap. This kind of sample are ivory products, including all fake ivory products too. For our result can show you that we can identify in the different species of savanna African elephant, forest African elephant, Asian elephant, and also extinct mammoth too. The one of our interesting case is the elephant-tailed case. Nowadays, we found many Asian elephants are hunted for their skin across Asia for products such as the traditional medicine, skincare cream, and beads for necklace and necklace. This exposed the rise in poaching to supply a new kind of transnational wildlife crime. Example as this case. The two suspects were arrested when officials found 24 tusks and 16 elephant tails hidden in their car in Ta province near Thai-Myanmar border. From our result, we found all evidence are Asian elephant, and out that some of elephant tail and ivory were matched as the same individual. These were not matched with our captive elephant DNA database. It means that these evidence samples are wild elephants, which are illegal exactly. Okay, so I'm sure that forensic is the innovative tool which is very helpful to save our wildlife in the world. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We accept one question from us.
Question, please.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was indeed very insightful. I was going to question just inquiry only. Just in one of the slides, I saw that the number of samples that you received in 2016 was around 600, and finally it rose to around 1,200 in 2017. Can you say something about the reason behind why it rose like that?
The question is about why we found
the samples you have been receiving every year. In 2016, the number of samples you received was around 600 something. But in 2017, suddenly it rose to around 1,200 around the same. Anyway, it is not a serious question. It was a query only.
Decreasing of the sample. Decreasing of the sample in the 2016. Maybe it's my
no problem. Thank you very much.
question too, because it's just maybe cannot sure that the strong or weak of the enforcement in our country. Yes.
Thank you very much. So we move to the next presenters. So DNA forensic in protected and CITES forestry cases studies. So, Dr.
While waiting to the technical, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to present the paper on the DNA forensic on forestry in protect species and CITES species. It's a case study for enhancing the law enforcement. Okay, thank you. I'm the forest technical expert in the Department of National Park Wildlife Plant Conservation. They work on the experience on wildlife and plants forensics, but during this presentation, I will present focusing on the DNA forensic and forestry. As you all know that the tropical forestry have illegal logged heavily in the past, and we have tried our best, I think all of us in the country, to force how to halt the illegal logging. But so far, we cannot resolve this. So when in EU and in US have the rule and regulation on the European Union Timber Regulation and also Laser Act, everyone know that they don't want to have the illegal product transferred to their country. And also that nowadays the DNA forensic also is legalized in Thailand. This is very efficient tool to facilitate enhanced law enforcement. And the number of cases have been asked to our lab. It's in the Forest and Plant Conservation Research Office. We have the DNA lab there for over nearly 30 years. And the question is mostly to verify the species and verify the individuals. So the species in the case I will pinpoint today is the protect species, Acuraria krasna, teak, Tutanacarantis, and rosewood. It's a divergent consonances, and also verify sample of the teak and rosewood, the divergent consonances. The tool we call to identify is we use the sequence at the Matraske, Robisco, and also TNH, PHPA special regions. To use individual identification of fingerprints, we use the DNA microsatellite like SSR simple sequence repeat. I will show you 7 cases that we have done before. The first one is to identify whether confused sawdust and confused wood as the crime scenes are the same species of the protected species. The second one to verify whether the confused is from the protected wild mangrove or not. And also the third one to verify whether the confused piece of the teak from the plantation. And also the first one is to verify whether the confused timber is Dalbergia consensus or Merciifera. The fifth one is to identify whether the 142 confused pieces of wood are from any tree, illegal log tree of the endangered rosewood. The sixth one is to verify whether the fungus wood in Dalbergia consensus and the sawdust and piece of wood have the same genotype as stump illegal log at the temple. And the seventh one is to verify whether the confused the rosewood twig have the same genotype, the root and regenerate shoot at illegal log tree stump. And the last one, we will give sample how we develop the SNP to verify origin of the double gene consonances. So I focus the first one, case study. We have 4 samples sent to us to the conscious food for illegal log timber and sawdust. And also there are 4 samples. The question to ask whether the 1 and 2 sample the same, the same species, and the third and the fourth and the same species or not. And we use the methodology I explained you before. We extract DNA and then amplify and use the phylogenetic study. So according to our DNA barcode database, we compare the sample, the conscious sample with our database. It turned out that the sample from the sawdust, from the crime scene, is Steroria and is not the protect species. And when we compare another genes, it turned out that the consistent sample is not a Curaria. It means that this sample is not protect species, so the suspect person is innocent to this case. The second one is to verify whether the conscious wood, mango wood is from protect wild mango or not. This is rather difficult if you verify by the anatomy and the leaf, because it's difficult to verify whether it is a domesticated mango or the wild species. So that this is the sample that's sent to our lab. You can see the leaf is just when cannot verify, and the taxonomists say that they can identify only if they have the flowers. So thus they also have the difficulty to verify when we saw at only the timber and the leaf. So we just extract DNA and fry it, and then it's very interesting that even we saw only the fragment of DNA fragment, the wild mangoes had a different DNA fragment size comparing to the confiscated and domesticated mango. And the size of the DNA exactly the same as the domesticated mango when we saw only from the DNA fragment when we amplify at the specific gene as a non-coding TNH PSPA special region in the chloroplast DNA. When we according to the sequencing, we saw the variable nucleotide size have in of the conscious wood the same, exactly the same as the domesticated mango variety. You can see when we conducted the phoretic tree, and so we can see that the confiscated wood had the same class as the domesticated mango. So we have a lot of number of domesticated mangoes. Some of them very tasty, and some of you have already tasted. If not, you should try to taste the Thai mango. Is too delicious. And the conclusion is that the confiscated wood from domesticated mangoes variety and the suspect person in this case is innocent. The third one is to verify whether conscious teak wood are from the plantation. This case is requested by the police. So they ask whether the conscious piece of teak wood, the sixth piece, and whether compatible genotype at the 5 teak stump, the illegal log from the plantation. Is the picture of the conscious piece of wood and also the stump that's sent to our lab. So the conclusion doesn't mean that the genotype of all the 6 one compatible with the 5 stump. So it means that this is a conscious piece of wood that is from illegal log teak, and also the such person is not innocent. The first one is It starts with the Dalbergia case, Dalbergia consonances, whether is this Dalbergia or is this Mesosphaeria. So we start with the anatomy as well, because at the beginning it's very difficult to extract the DNA from this wood because they have number of resins in the wood. But from anatomy and also DNA, it turned out that this species is actually Mesosphaeria, is not Dalbergia consonances. So the fifth one is very hard work because the police sent 142 confiscated pieces of wood to our lab, and also to identify whether they also from any oak tree, illegal log tree in the national park or not. I will skip something that is already explained you. So this case is just the suspect person, they chop, the sap wood, and they took only hard wood that is easy for them to carry out from the forest. So the 142 pieces sent to us to identify, and then luckily we have already methodology to identify the species at the beginning that we can prove that it's Dalbergia consonances. And also, this is the piece of wood. We extract DNA, and then I will show that. This is to first check that 142 is Dalbergia consonances or not. It confirmed that it's Dalbergia consonances. And when we work with the genotype, with the microsatellite from 9 loci, the number 29 and 30 consistent woods is compatible the genotype at the stem, stem number 1. This means that in this case, the suspect person is not innocent. The sixth one is the same case as Dalbergian consonances, but it's the case that is at the temple also. People also the illegally locked from the tree from the temple. The police sent the sawdust and piece of wood comparing whether they are the same genotype or not. So we're comparing the genotype. We do it exactly the same methodology. Sorry, I have to skip very quickly because the time is running. So it turned out that the genotype of the consistent wood is the species confirmed Dalbergia consonances, and so the genotype of the 10 microsatellite loci show that all the conscious material from Dalbergia consonances and all conscious material the same genotype. So it means the suspect person is innocent in this case. The last one is very complicated case because the owner of the one plantation, they claim that their neighbor took the tree from their plantation and then dig them and plant to another plantation. It's very complicated case. And then the police took the twig of the tree that thought that is illegally locked and transferred to another plantation, and also they took the wood and also the original shoot from the stem and comparing as to compare genotyping of the number of the loci to comparing, and it turned out that the confiscated wood have the genotype, the twigs are not identical to confiscated wood. If you can see from the clad of the cluster analysis, is not matched to each other. So it means that the suspect person is innocent. Sorry to run quickly. Actually, I have 100 slides. That's why I have to quickly running the slide, and you may not convenient to see it. The last one is not confiscated case, but it's just to show you that What I explained you before is just to identify species and also individual genotype fingerprints. But we know that in the future case, we have to identify the origin of where it comes from. That's why I developed the SNP, single nucleotide polymorphism in corpus genome to identify population of the Dalbergia in Thailand. So we collect the sample, about 20 samples in the range of distribution, the central, upper, and lower northeastern part of Thailand, and we use the 3 region in the corpus genome to verify the variable nucleotide, and we have the haplotype diversity specific to each population. You can see this one. And we can see that we have the very interesting result that we have specific haplotype diversity specific to each population that you can see in the picture. When we draw with the color, we can see they easily see the difference when we summarize. And also we test the population. This is actually spread in the South Thailand, and we can show that the origin of this material is from the northeastern part of Thailand, not from the central part of Thailand. And this is a summary that you can see the Rajasthani population, they have hepatitis H9, and the upper northeastern part of Thailand is H4. Buriram have another different hepatitis. Chayapum population have another hepatitis. Saburi, the central, have the same, exactly the same as H3, and the northeastern part, they don't have the same as this hepatitis. And Mahasarakam also have a rather different hepatitis. But as you can see that we can use this tool to identify the origin of conscious wood and timber of the Dalbergia consciousness in the future. For the way forward, that we are still working with DNA barcoding, protect species, cited species. I think we're going to finish by the end of this year. And also the information phylogeography, 25 population, very important. That now we work focusing already done by the Dalbergia consonances, and we're going to work with Dalbergia ovary in the next years. The new and also genetic diversity of the protect species, and so very important that is the background for identified population. And now we have the new project to be funded by Science State 3 Species Program to develop DNA marker to identify origin of Dalbergia consonances in select Asian member states. It means that we will work expanding my methodology explained you before to Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, so that we can know that the origin of conscious roots, whether from Thailand or for our neighbor country, that will be enhanced law enforcement. And that the work, and so in the future we have to enlarge our cooperation with other neighbor country to the different platforms. Thank you for your attention.
So thank you for your presentations. Any questions from us? If you have questions, please go to in lunchtime after presentation. So thank you very much for your presentation. So then we move to the next presentation from Mr. Mark Vito. Please start your presentation.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. You all hear me? Hello, I'm Mark Nuttall. I'm currently contracted to Interpol under the Environmental Security Wing. Prior to that, I was a senior detective within New Scotland Yard within the UK, and I'm here today to give you a presentation about how Interpol functions and how communication is the biggest key in driving investigation of criminality forward. Before I do that, I'll read you a small quote from William Polk from Crusading Jihad. Even in our study of history, we are the children of movies. They have proven to be far better communicators than textbooks. Indeed, the movies often provide the only history we know. But they come at a price. They simplify and distort, so what we often get is a false impression. Officers of Interpol have no authority and do not have any form of arrest powers. So whenever you see an article within the newspaper or within the media that points to us arresting individuals, we do not. We are there as a facilitation, a training and a best practice platform for police officers throughout the world. What we do is we sit there as the central conduit for intelligence within our member states, which number 192 countries. In 2015, what occurred is we realised that we needed to move with the times. So we opened the International Global Complex for Innovation in Singapore. And Singapore seemed a pretty apt location. It's in the region that it needs to sit, and it deals with matters that couldn't normally be dealt with within Lyon. We have a range of functions within IGCI. One of those functions is the Cyber Fusion Centre, where we deal with a whole range of specific criminal matters that derive from elements of technology. Another range of skill sets within IGCI is the Innovation Centre. And within the Innovation Centre, we have a range of digital forensic practitioners, and those digital forensic practitioners are currently dealing with the issue of drones and criminality through utilising those specific technological advances. When I say evolution, I'm in a room full of scientists at the moment, so I apologise about the use of that phrase, but it is more in line with technological evolution and also in terms of creating a quick fix or a run, a differential at a matter that needs to be dealt with. As you can see up there, human nature will force us to, in terms of abject matters that, such as forced famine or debilitating hunger, etc., will force us into a situation and a scenario where we have to commit various different types of atrocities. And that runs from simple criminality as much as it does to the hydrogen bomb. Shackled. Policing is shackled. It is shackled by judiciary and the timeframes in which various different legislative frameworks function. I have known and have dealt with cases that have run for 5 years within a criminal court, and that is within the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom and some of its Western counterparts are supposed to be at the cutting edge of criminal justice. So you can see the type of events that work in states that currently do not have a criminal justice system which is more technologically advanced. We are tied into contracts, long-term technological contracts. We could be tied in for 10 years, 15 years into the same case management systems, the same intelligence systems, and it creates frustration for police officers who want to be doing work at the forefront, boots on the ground approach. And training has moved. With technology, training has moved to online training, to e-learning. But you don't get the same forms of learning and development. You end up in a situation where actually you're on a hamster wheel. You're staring at a screen, you're pressing a button, you are not learning, you are not repeating. You are just taking the information, pressing the button for a certificate and receiving that. I think we need to move back to a more structured way of learning. I'll move on. So, technological advancement, progression and regression. We tend to find that criminology moves much faster than ourselves. It doesn't matter what type of crime it is, whether it's a commodity such as timber, or whether you're talking about a man-made commodity such as cocaine. We, within policing, are again hampered by technology. Some of our technology is ancient, and that goes for the Western world as much as it does for the Eastern. We are blocked. We are segmented into remits. And I'm talking here from a policing perspective within a home law enforcement capacity. Interpol tries to bring these elements together and tries to bring a best practice approach to the fore. It all starts with deprivation and wanting comfort. We all want comfort, we all want something else, we all want something new. We start with our first car as a small one, small four-door. We want to move on to that big Jaguar. It's exactly the same when somebody's deprived. When they're deprived of food, they will take a hatchet, do a tree. They will sell that wood or utilise that wood for firewood and gain some food from it. It then moves on. If you know you can gain money from something, then you will move over, you will buy a chainsaw, you will then cut more wood down. You will organise crime if it's not licensed. And if you can get more, you will get more. It's as simple as that. Whether it be a substance such as cocaine or a firearm through to firearm distribution, human beings want more and more comfort. As you can see from the right hand, it's a very simplified money laundering cycle, but it works. And from small crime comes large crime. From a commodity transfer from a watch to cash, through to shell companies, diversification, and large multinational organised crime. It all flows and it all goes into the same direction. What do? We bring police together. We try and coordinate, we try and facilitate, and we try and train utilising best practice methods. We have intelligence systems. That intelligence we analyse and we try and enrich so that it is better information than how we received it. We see the global picture from a holistic background. We have various different levels of capacity within Interpol. As you can see within the central column there, we analyse a whole range of different crime ratios, and we try to place those crimes together. We try and see the terrorist to the deforestation. We try and see the drugs through to the money launderers. We see the cycle, and we try to continue to build on the intelligence picture that we have. We also try to do a learning training platform in a traditional and an e-learning component, so that once the e-learning has been completed, we do a physical component. We have 192 member states. That
that is close to the entire world, but for 2 or 3 maybe, depending on political ramifications. Those police officers provide us with information. That information can come from members of the public. It can come from a whole range of different surveillance techniques, dependent on the legislation of that country. It can come from prisoner intelligence and information. It can come from interviews. It can come from further investigation from the member states themselves, utilising forensic methods, both physically and digitally. It can come from, It can come from social media platforms and open source research. It can come from the internet. It can come from news. It can come from journalists. It can come from human intelligence sources and intelligence sources on a governmental level. It can come from court orders, and it can come from different types of legislation. We don't have the use of some of those facilities that mainline in-stream policing has, that those member states do, but we utilise other methods. We piece together those 192 countries' data. We do open source research. We liaise with NGOs. We liaise with international organisations and take information and intelligence from those facilities. And we place everything together, and we also utilise a range of technology to do that. Project LEAF. That is what I'm currently contracted on. I'm the Criminal Intelligence Officer for Asia. There are 2 Criminal Intelligence Officers for all of Asia. And we deal with any intelligence or information that could come our way. Now, whether that's from police or whether that's from any other source, we will receive it. That's a very brief snapshot of what we all know occurs, and none of this is confidential information. It's information that you can get from various different police agencies, through news reports, but it's concatenated together. What is our Achilles heel is corruption, and it can happen anywhere, at any level, at any time, including governmental levels. It is difficult for us because we work through national central bureaus when dealing with police information. When we are dealing with that police information, we do not know whether at the other side is a corrupt regime or a corrupt officer, for that matter. And we do not know that if we provide information to that regime from other regimes, that other individual is not corrupt. We within the policing family like to think that we are all part of a clan, that we are all part of a family. Unfortunately, some of those members of those families are rather dysfunctional. And as such, we have to think corruption each time we deal with anybody when we are liaising with policing institutions, non-governmental organisations, or international organisations. It is our big Achilles heel. If anybody has got any information in relation to forestry crime, then please email me at that email address. Police information comes in differently. They come through national central bureaus. So if you've got anything that you think might be of use to us in the bigger picture, then please take that email address down, and I will attempt my best to be able to deal with it. It's been an absolute pleasure to be invited to speak today, and I hope it's been of use. If anybody's got any questions, please ask me. I know we're under a bit of a tight regime, and I will get button pressed. So if anybody's got anything, please do ask. Nope.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I know that Interpol works with the NCB, the concerned country, and Interpol has been engaged in different wildlife crime control through NCB.
Yes.
So, what I want to know from you, since you are from Interpol, so can you just, we know that Interpol has many successes. Can you just cite one example where Interpol intervened and grabbed one of the masterminds of wildlife crime?
Interpol?
I mean, you helped grabbing this mastermind.
Yes, we assist by placing member countries with each other. I would never, as a previous police officer, gain any credit for the hard work that the men and women within the police forces take. We don't arrest, we don't convict, we don't go through that arduous process. There are individuals and there are organised criminal networks that have been taken down as such through our data enrichment and through the facilitation that we provide with member states. However, we do not take the credit as police officer and know the hard work that comes with that type of activity.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your question.
So thank you very much for your
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your presentations. So we move the next presentations, the advanced investigation and anti-smuggling technique by Mr. Brossard. So, mic is yours.
Hello. Good afternoon. I don't have a presentation. You're welcome. My 5 to 10 minutes presentation or discussion actually will focus very much on how technology can support investigations in the fight against wildlife crime. Now, if for a moment we just look at the sort of crime that we are talking about this morning, we will see few basic steps. We have the moment when wildlife is poached, when wildlife is concealed for transportation, when wildlife is sold, and when money is transferred. Now, the question that we should try to answer now is how technology, science, and innovation can help disrupt these criminal activities that I just described. Now, we have seen many examples this morning, especially with a focus on DNA analysis. There are many other examples, some of which we haven't talked about yet. Some are very specific to the fight against wildlife crime. Now, for instance, in the phase of poaching, the first part of the criminal chain, there is already some technology that has been provided in support of rangers or wildlife agencies in general. And we have heard many times talking about drones or talking about using the satellite images for monitoring or remote sensing, we've heard also this morning. And of course, we've seen also forensics as specifically for the analysis of the crime scene after a poaching incident. During the transportation, one of the key technology that is often used is actually very much based on risk analysis and utilizing softwares that can help mainly customs authority to profile containers or air cargoes or passengers before they arrive to the port. And through these profiling techniques, you can avoid opening containers that most likely don't have, for instance, ivory, and you focus only on those that are more likely to contain ivory or other wildlife. And during the phase of selling and buying, of course, we have already seen a lot of phone apps that should help buyers or just normal people or even law enforcement authorities to identify wildlife. The identification of wildlife remains a major problem for law enforcement authorities. Those that come across wildlife most of the time still don't manage to understand what kind of wildlife they have in front of them, but at least some of these phone apps can offer some support. They don't resolve the issue, but they offer some support. Now, these are some of the technology that is currently used, but there are a lot of issues around this technology. They are not utilized to the full power. They're not sometimes understood, and probably they're not really sufficient to combat properly the kind of crimes that we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about a form of organized crime. I heard somebody in the morning talking about the need of recognizing wildlife crimes as a form of organized crime. So technology becomes probably more useful when combating organized crime. And being a form of organized crime, wildlife trafficking should be fought also through the use of technology. Now, we've heard about forensics, and we have heard so much about DNA forensic, so I don't touch upon this area, just saying that it's very useful, for instance, to determine when the origin of the wildlife. That is an important information. But there is also digital forensics that comes from the analysis of online material. There is also the need of having more audio and video surveillance. For instance, also using tracking devices when following containers to conduct some controlled deliveries, meaning postponing the moment of the seizures and try to conduct an enforcement operation when the consignment is reaching the final buyer. In this way, you understand a little bit more about the organized criminal structure. And criminal intelligence. We just heard the need of having criminal intelligence softwares that actually, in a sense, connect dots so that a seizure can be connected to another seizure, a telephone number can be connected to other associates or to other criminal episodes. So there is a need of looking at the bigger picture. The human eye, the human brain alone cannot do that, and softwares in this sense that have been already developed can be very, very useful. And then there is the old technology that supports the fight against organized crime. Some of which we have already mentioned. It's not necessary to go deeper. But what are the issues that we encounter as UNODC when we try to provide this technology, this software to the member states, to the governments, to the law enforcement agencies? Some of the issues are really important ones. We have, for instance, the fact that very often wildlife investigating advanced techniques for which technology is used. So very often the investigations remain at lower level because that's the mandate of some of the wildlife agencies, and the use of technology is less useful because they don't have really a mandate to go a little bit higher. Sometimes the investment in technology are not sustainable for governments. While technology theoretically should help to achieve bigger results with less expenses, what governments see at the beginning is mainly the expense, the cost of purchasing a machine, purchasing a software, purchasing the fees, the annual fees for using that software, or training the staff to use that software. That's also very important. The technology, when it's provided to the law enforcement agencies, sometimes doesn't reach the investigators that are working on wildlife crimes. Very often we hear about wildlife investigators that arrest police officers, criminals with telephones, and they don't have the software to analyze the telephones. Now, those softwares are available with other departments of the police or other departments of other agencies. But those wildlife investigators with the telephones don't have access to that software. That software is kept by different agencies, and when there is no good interagency cooperation or even cooperation within departments of the same agencies, it's very difficult to make that software widely available also to wildlife investigators. And then there is also an issue that digital evidence in some countries or in some legal frameworks is still not considered as admissible in court. So information that you take from the telephones that you confiscate, from the computers that you confiscate, or from the social media that the traffickers have used, very often they are still not admissible in court. So starting to admit digital evidence in court is a first step to make technology useful and important for ensuring investigation and prosecution against the most advanced forms of wildlife crime. Now, what are the immediate steps to be taken? Legal reviews is important, changing the laws, making the laws most modern and updated in order to allow for digital evidence to be admitted, identifying better ways to introduce technology. For instance, sometimes that technology, since it's used for the investigation of organized criminal activity, transnational criminal activities, are better placed within the police than within the wildlife agencies. And sometimes we see money being spent to give technology to agencies that cannot really use that technology, that don't have a mandate. So sometimes when we're talking about fighting organized crime, we should give that technology to the department, to the agencies that are actually entitled, mandated to combat organized crime. Or try to combine resources from different agencies to actually make a better use of the limited resources available. Meaning, if one department of the police has got the software to analyze phones and computers, then it would be useful that maybe the wildlife agencies, when they confiscate telephones and computers, bring the material to the police to be analyzed, rather than trying to develop a number of centers that probably don't reach a particularly high level of excellence, but at the same time they tend to spread resources. Now, I'm conscious of the time constraints, so I wouldn't go any further in this discussion. I just wanted to bring up some of the issues that we encounter when we try to provide technology, or when we try to provide innovative solutions to the law enforcement agencies to combat wildlife crime. If you have any question, I'll try to answer now. Otherwise, I'll pass the floor to the next speaker so that you can go for lunch at some point soon. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Good afternoon now. Time is going. Okay, I think I have to introduce as well myself. I'm Faustini Masalo, co-chair. Yeah. Now I would like to introduce the last presenter for this afternoon session before we go to lunch. Welcome.
Thank you so much, co-chair and chairperson. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you are not too hungry. because it's near the lunchtime. I promise I will keep it in short. So first of all, so I'm on behalf of the Secretary General of World Customs Organization. The left picture is Kunio Mikuria, Dr. Kunio Mikuria. He's the Secretary General of WCO. Actually, he's very interested to attend this conference. Unfortunately, due to his very busy agenda, so he tasks our regional office of capacity building to here. So that's why I'm here. So my name is Tong Hua, and I'm the China Customs Officer, secretary to Thailand for the capacity building office. So let's continue. So as you might know, WCO is the only sole intergovernment organization focused on the customs matters. And the formal name, you might know WCO, actually the formal name should be Customs Cooperation Council, CCC. More easy to remember than change the name to WCO, but in the document, the formal document should be CCC. And the headquarters in Brussels, we have 182 members, all customs and administrations in the world, mainly account for 98% of the whole global trade volume. So I just show you some information. The first is because this is related with the technology conference, so you might know customs throughout the world, they are using about 60% of the customs clearance system. Tailor-made, they are also using single window system. You might know here in Thailand, they have the Thai single window system, and the ASEAN members, they are on the way to building the ASEAN single window as well. So it's very useful for trade facilitation for the customs matters, for customs control. And just one case I show you for the Hong Kong customs. So you might know customs, they are using risk management as a very frequently used methods to identify what's the high risks, like especially for the cargoes and the containers, and then they can decide how to, which one to open for the physical inspection, for example, like that. And I think the most important thing for the risk management is the risk profiling indicators. So the key words here is the traders plus goods and also the routings. So I was very impressed by the chairperson because he introduced the possibility maybe using the DNA technology to tracing the trade road. I think it's a very good idea, and if we continue, we have lots of laboratory scientifically can support this. It's very useful for the enforcement team. I work in the regional office in AP region. We have 33 customs members, and I don't mention all of them. Just to let you know, current vice chair, our headquarters is in Brussels. In every region, there's a vice chair. Current vice chair is the India Customs. And also we have 7 regional training centers for all over the Asia Pacific. And my office is located in Thai Customs, Gong Sulaga Gong. And we are the first ROCB in the world. So I think I just want to share some key projects and initiatives. You must know what the WCO do in the wildlife protection area. I think this is one of the highlights of the wildlife project. It's called the WCO Enamel project. And it followed actually the very successfully enforcement activity by the formal projects called gapping, and so they forced the Enamel. It's mainly covered the sub-Sahara Africa region, mainly focused for all the CITES CITES cases. And it's still undergoing and will be end at the end of this year. So this is currently one of the very key project of WCO. And also, you might know ICC-WC. WCO also is one of the partner working very closely together with other international organizations. This is, you must be very familiar with it. Another one is called the Green Customs Initiative. Also, lots of the, the international conventions, how to guarantee to implement those MEAs smoothly and streamlined among lots of stakeholders. So WCO also one of the key players in this, the Green Customs Initiative. It's not only about like wildlife protection, just for CITES, also covers areas like, for example, like solid waste control, and also you might know the ODS, some activities. WCO has an open source information sharing platform. You can also go to this website. It's called IRIS. It's an open source information, but also for the members, they have their own account and ID, can access for some customs area specific information. And for WCO, we also have information sharing tool called EnviroNet. And also we have CEN, called the Customs Enforcement Network, and the National Customs Enforcement Network, NCEN. So this is the main information sharing tools in WCO. We have e-learning platform, and especially we have CITES e-learning, and also related like Montreal and lots of Green Customs GCI initiative. About 5 related with environmental topics e-learning courses in WCO. It's all open for all the customs members. And I want to especially mention about, as I understand, we see lots of the seizures of the image of those products, those wildlife products. But I want to mention is that I think another thing is also very important. I think wildlife protection is a very broader topic. So like this, you see the turtle is eating the plastic bag. So of course it's not a seized, it's not a product, but actually it will also very big influence for those species. So that's why WCO, they have recently actually continuously support for must control the solid wastes. That's why in this year I'm also the China Customs founding manager. So I organized a regional workshop in Shanghai, invited AP region members and also WCO experts and also GCI, Green Customs members, GCI initiative members to attend this called Disciplinary Force operation, global operation. It's mainly focused on the solid waste. And this year for WCO, we prioritized 2 things in our action plan. You see, the first is support the Royal Foundation United for Wildlife Transport Task Force. Another one is continue implement customs-related initiatives in the ICC-WC strategic plan. So our ROCB also in cooperate with the implemented WCO's strategic plan. And for your information, we will organize another environmental topics regional workshop in Shanghai. And this time we will not only focus for the wastes, but also including the CITES. So I'm very happy to see if any of you are interested, you can come to me. You just know customs actually facing lots of challenges. Traditionally, you might know customs is an agency to collect revenue collection, and maybe the trade statistics control and anti-smuggling. But nowadays, at the border, it's the, someone call it the front line, but actually also sometimes it's also the last gate. Because once the illicit trade those goods into your domestic market, it's very hard to trace it anymore. So that's why as a border agency, it's very important to stop those high risk or those illicit trade at the border. So in customs, you might know we have a 21st century. That's a strategic document for all customs. And you see here, they said enabling intelligence technology. And also we have global network. So this is lots of idea about how to use the technology to enhance customs capacity to identify lots of high-risk goods and how to control the border more efficient. Nowadays it's a digital era. And you see even now the AlphaGo already beat the human being in Go games. And especially huge booming in the e-commerce. So it changes lots of way, also for not only for customs actually, but also for all kinds of business patterns. So just like from the very beginning, I remember the speaker mentioned about nowadays the internet also have pros and cons. So lots of illicit trade now on the internet. How to using like cyber forensics, cyber investigation, how to tracing this become one of the topics. And for the technology now, also for customs are frequently using it. First is you might know cloud computing based on the big data analysis. It's very frequently used. Another one is the mobile inspection, because it's also useful for frontline officers. Once they have any document, any application to support the frontline officer to sometimes even very, very simple to check the HS code sometimes. You might know HS code to see whether it matches the real goods or whether they can check like a declaration form or any kinds of the related documents at the first site. It's very important. It's very simple, but very important. Also, the reviving this kind of car licensing system, because some smuggler they will change the car plans even. So using this kind of technology can tracing the car system. And you also know the human face recognition. It's also widely used, especially at the airport, for lots of airport passengers if they are passing. I know currently, at the border between like Shenzhen and Hong Kong, now China Customs already deploying this system. And I also attended, in WCO, we have annually we organize the WCO IT conference. I saw several other service providers, they show this kind of technology. But I'm more interested in how they combine the passenger data together with this human face. So can this like automatically to alert for customs officer for enhance their to give their lots of the information they need. And you also know the intelligence analyzing, this like data mining, and especially changing lots of patterns. But I want to say, I'm a customs officer. I know actually sometimes we are very looked upon the technology side. But to be frank, I think this kind of pattern from the very beginning must be created by the human being. Actually, only the expert, they know the most efficient pattern. It's the human's wisdom. Finally, the technology helps human to reduce the working time or something like that. So using this kind of technology will save lots of time and limited resources in customs. this is the actual case when the China Customs applying the new inspection, the patterns. Actually, after they call the deep learning. After deep learning, the actual seizing rate, you see the right picture, actually really increased a lot. So it does very dramatically influence even the enforcement action. So another case, very quick. So just want to let you know is currently like in EU customs, they are deploying and do research for the smart customs X-ray comparing system. It can be automatically give the customs officer the information whether it matches the picture or not. I show you another case. This is by one of the service provider called Nuktech. Now they already applied in China, for example, like liquor, cigarette, and a gun, because this is very very obvious shaped. Actually, it can be very easy to identify once you accumulate enough X-ray pictures. Once the database of the pictures is enough, I think in the future it will increase the accuracy more and more. So I just suggest in the future whether we can have a wildlife X-ray picture database. If we have this kind of very useful tool, I do believe it will be very useful for especially for the container X-ray cargo inspection. So thank you very much. I can be reached via my email. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Dr. Fa. Is there any? We accept one question from floors. Okay, so thank you very much for your presentations. So the time is run out for these sessions. So unfortunately, I skipped the discussion sessions. In the keynote speech, I mentioned wildlife forensic is the relatively new field, but we need data sharing system, especially the DNA sequence data. I hope we can establish international data sharing system, not only sequence data, but also the other wildlife crime cases. Then I hope all participants will make fruitful discussion after these sessions. So thank you for your participation, and thank you for your cooperation for this session. Thank you very much.
We hope that the audience gained fruitful insight about how technology can support investigation against wildlife crimes. We will now disperse for lunch. I would like everyone to please note that food coupons are being given at the reception for lunch. So please kindly proceed there, and after lunch we will gather back again for the second session.